In 2007, Apple iPhone was set to release their very first device. They were looking for a network that would be exclusive, but still one that they could have most of the marketing control, all of the design control, most of the control of everything except for having enough of that broadband cloud space to enable their devices to actually work. And so they wanted this exclusive relationship, and so they signed a deal with AT&T, who at the time was looking to be bigger and larger and stronger in the wireless network market. And so they made this deal that for 5 years, AT&T would be the exclusive carrier of the iPhone. And AT&T would get 10% of the iPhone sales, and of those sales also in the AT&T stores, while Apple would get $10 per month of the AT&T iPhone subscribers bill. AT&T would also get a thin slice of those iTunes revenues, while Apple would get control of design, manufacturing, marketing. That was very, very important to them. And they formed this alliance, and people were really, really excited for it. The launch was June 27th, 2007, and there was AT&T already had over 1 million inquiries about this device, and they could have taken that into consideration before it was even released, because when it was released, problem number one, AT&T wanted so badly to be in this market. They made this big deal. They thought they had done it all, but there was a lack of communication upon how much this device could truly do, because at the time, no one thought half the things that this device could do was actually possible. And so it took up much more of the space for all of the AT&T's network coverage. It took up a lot of space. And so people had dropped calls, they had loss of service, anything like that people were experiencing, and it really negatively impacted AT&T as a whole. This was their first big venture that they had, and they were not prepared. And what they could have done to do this better, they should have had better partnerships, better contracting with Apple, and they could have had a better co-managed planning process, including sharing those forecasts, engineering teams, investment commitments tied to the products, and just the overall analytics that could have been, hey, it's better to have more technology and, I guess, excess room for an overwhelming amount of consumers, rather than this should be enough, because it wasn't near enough, and it really hurt them overall as a brand. And they could have just had a better contract and could have looked into that better with Apple before saying, hey, we're really excited for this, let's go for it. And another big issue was AT&T knew that they only had this contract for 5 years. 5 years. It made them for 5 years. But their issue lied in not preparing during that, even just that first year, for that year 5, when maybe they weren't re-signed. Maybe other companies would have access to these iPhones. It wouldn't be an exclusive relationship anymore. And that's what happened. And they did not have a competitive position once this happened. And not only that, they hadn't been working on their own handsets from other companies to be able to build those alliances, those relationships. And they did not build themselves any new avenues, which they should have been doing. And although they had this super big brand reputation hit from having such bad network for the first little bit on those iPhones, their revenue doubled immediately. So although they had more subscribers, their brand took a hit, but no one cared, because that was the only way to get the iPhone at the time. But after this 5 years was over, they could go to different brands, see what these other experiences were like. So they need to become competitive. But what they could have done before this 5 years was over, during that first year, they could have made a team that was proactive with, hey, what are we working on to be self-sufficient, and we need to make sure if we don't have Apple, we can be self-sufficient. And they need to have teams to work on their technology. They need to have engineering teams. They need to have investment commitments tied to product launches, overall analytics. And AT&T could have just been much more proactive and focused on themselves. Yes, if you have something great, that's amazing, but you have to set yourself up to be a long-term supported by yourself, and something that's short-term and very successful is great, as long as it does not harm that long-term success. And so AT&T needed to have had teams prepared for if those 5 years were up and they were not exclusive, and they needed to be working on themselves self-sufficiently and making sure that if they did not have Apple, they were still different. They still had something going for them other than this one company, because Apple was very, very smart by doing that. This is earnings per share from 2007 to 2012 of the Apple iPhone. And those are all the companies that didn't have anything at first. And once Apple in 2011 released it to all these other companies, they just grew. They grew. It did not harm them. It harmed all of these carriers. Although it didn't harm the rest of those carriers, because they didn't have a share of that Apple magic yet. And so there's a lot of things that AT&T could have done to be more proactive, but luckily they started branching out onto avenues that they were eventually able to develop, but they could have been ahead of to begin with.